Hi, I'm Ellen, I'm an alcoholic. Can you hear me clearly? Okay. My sobriety date is March 2nd, 2016. Prior to that, I had been drinking for 35 years. I started drinking at the age of 14. I used to come home from school, freshman year of high school, and mix a gin and tonic to relax after school. I don't think that's a normal drinker. My birth mother was a homeless alcoholic woman in the city of Boston for 20 years. I did not know her. My birth father was in the Coast Guard and drunk and getting women pregnant all over the world. My grandparents on both sides were alcoholic. I was adopted into a family that was also an important cultural aspect of drinking. I grew up in Somerville and Medford, so there'd be a lot of drinking and drug use as well. So not really surprising that I would have been mixing myself a gin and tonic after school to calm my nerves. And in high school, also other experimentation with other drugs. And chasing boys, but because of my fear of economic insecurity, the drugs and alcohol, I had some jackpots. I was assaulted by my boyfriend. I had car crashes and so forth. But my fear of economic insecurity was so intense that I was able to kind of pull it together to be able to go to BU and get an engineering degree and graduate. And that fear of economic insecurity kind of kept my alcoholism at bay, if you will. Like, I could only drink enough to not allow me to not go to work in the morning. So I had a good career, I got a master's degree, I had a very prestigious job. On the outside and on paper, you might not have known. Maybe if you talked to me for a few minutes, you would have known, but looking at my resume or whatever, you wouldn't think, this is a person with alcoholism and a lot of problems. Like it says in the book, women alcoholics often turn into the real thing and are gone beyond recognition in a few years. And the precipitating event for that for me was needing to quit my job to stay home with my kids. So I had 2 children, and my daughter has a disability, my son has a disability, and childcare was just too difficult, so I quit. And now I'm home with them, and it's too unstructured, and there was no real reason, if you will, other than being an alert mother. There was no economic reason for me to stop drinking. And so I would continue to. So my drinking went off the cliff kind of fast. And I don't know how many years it was now, maybe 10 years or so, where something like that, 9 or 10 years, where it's like one day when was the last night I didn't have a drink? I couldn't remember, and I also couldn't not have a drink. I drank wine, mostly, but other things too. Drugs kind of never came back into the picture for me. And then I had an abnormal blood test result, and I went to see a hematologist. And for some reason, I kind of knew that, it probably wasn't good what I was doing, but, look at my recycling bin and be like, yeah, it's not good, arranging the water bottles on top of all the wine bottles. And I was like, procrastination is a big weapon of this disease. It's like, I'll get to that later. But I went to this hematologist, and for some reason, I was honest with him. He said, what do you think it is? And I don't know why, but I was honest with him. And I'd never been honest with anybody, including myself, about how much I was drinking. So I told him, and he said, well, you need to stop drinking. I said, okay. So I tried to do it on my own. And I could like do it for a few days and then like something would happen, something good, something bad, whatever, didn't matter, and I would drink again. And then it would, progress back to my everyday thing. And as you know, it's not just the drinking, it's like first thing in the morning, just that horrible feeling. I remember trying to get my kids on the bus and just being absolutely exhausted and hungover and miserable and suffering. I didn't know that you could drink in the morning to make that better. It's really good no one told me that. And then all afternoon, waiting for 5 o'clock to roll around. All that mental obsession, and then, beginning to drink, and all the trying to manage it and that. So after a couple of years of trying to stop on my own, this doctor kept seeing me every so often, following me. And he's a wonderful man, and Dr. Snyder. And I don't know what it was, but on March 1st, my liver was enlarged, I had peripheral neuropathy, it was like brain fog. My body was definitely negatively impacted. I hated everyone, starting with myself. I had no power greater than myself, other than alcohol. I didn't think there was a God. I had left all that behind, my childhood spiritual training, I left that all behind. I thought, there's no God, because how could there be all this suffering in the world? Why would a loving God that could stop it choose not to? And I thought my human brain would be able to comprehend that. And so, I don't know, I was at a wine tasting, and I suddenly had a moment of clarity that the pores weren't big enough anymore. And I actually didn't care about the terroir and the mouthfeel and all the things the lies I'd been telling myself about being I'm an enophile. No, you're an alcoholic. And I had an appointment with Dr. Snyder the next day, and for some reason I left that appointment and went straight to an AA meeting. And I was just ready, a moment of honesty and clarity. And I'd been afraid to go. I think I was afraid of being all scary people there or something. But as you all know, it was just a warm embrace of love and acceptance. And I heard for the first time spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. Because I had thought I needed to have perfection in order for a power greater than myself to love me. And what I didn't understand is actually the opposite. It's the love of my higher power that enables me to make spiritual progress. So I heard that message of death and weight, and I kept coming. And it was God was chasing me with, sorry if I'm going to use the word higher power, I don't trigger anybody who doesn't like the word God, but my higher power was chasing me with a butterfly net, trying to get me into Big Book Study, flitting around. So multiple Big Book Study people were sent my way, and I found a sponsor. My parents lived on the Cape at the time, and I spent a lot of time all summer there, my kids. So I was on the Cape, and my sponsor was there. And she suggested that I ask a power greater than myself to keep me away from a drink or a drug just for today. I didn't understand that I was powerless over alcohol. I didn't understand the allergy of the body, that if I put any alcohol in my body at all, I set off a chain reaction because of my body chemistry. And the reaction I'm going to have is to continue to crave more alcohol. My body is different than other people's bodies. We don't know why yet. Someday we'll know. Scientists will figure it out. We haven't yet. But there is something with my body that it just can't react like other people react. Other people get tired and dizzy and they want to stop drinking. I'm dancing around, I'm energized. That's an allergy, and that's never going to be different. And that helped me to accept my alcoholism because I had this strong shame from the culture attached to the idea of being an alcoholic. And so it took the shame away because your body is like being a diabetic or having low thyroid. There's no shame about that. It's just the way your body is. That was a big moment to learn about that. And to learn that I could pray to a being that I didn't even believe in, to keep me away from a drink or a drug. Just for today, I didn't take any drugs, but I throw that in anyway, because you never know. So I did that, and believe it or not, I did not drink any alcohol. And my mother was dying of cancer at the time, and I went to a lot of meetings, immersed myself in the fellowship, and came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. I heard the testimony in Big Book Step Study meetings, and it was clear everyone was being really honest about their experience, and you all helped me to believe that I could also become healed of this disease. I took the third step in the fall of 2016 at West Ennis Community Church in West Ennis, Massachusetts. I put about as much thought into it as you typically put when you're signing up for the terms and conditions on an app on your phone. You don't even read it, you just click the check mark. I just wanted to get to the instructions for the fourth step. I was like, you have steps that can fix me. I know I need to be fixed now. Please fix me. I want to do it, so I will say this prayer on my knees. But I had made a decision. That's the important thing. The word decision in the Big Book, it means something more thoughtful than the resolutions we used to make. The resolution would typically be, it's feel terrible, and I want this terrible feeling to stop, and so I'm making a resolution. Decision is more like a thoughtful process. You really considered it, prayed about it. So I made the decision, and Margaret gave me the instructions. And I forgot to mention. I'm sorry. Let me just mention now. Before I said the third step prayer, we were reading the Big Book. I brought all my notebooks with me, and I should also say, if you are somebody who didn't like school, and maybe you had trouble in school, and maybe people made fun of you because the schoolwork didn't come easy to you. I found that people like that often have trouble with the idea of this work, because it feels like that fearful, awful experience. I didn't have that. I was good at school. Not anything else but that. But if you can just be aware of that and trust that a higher power will help you do that writing, even if in school it wasn't easy for you, because it's not us solving a calculus problem, it's a higher power giving us words to write on a page. Even if you can't read very well, it's okay. Your sponsor will read with you. I just want to say that because I feel like it's a big impediment for many people. But not for me. I love it. So I did an outline of all the chapters. I was asked to outline words in the book, look them up and write down the definitions, to highlight things. I made notes, questions from my sponsor, and I made notes as we were talking to each other. I just brought this with me. And if anyone wants to see any of this or look through it, please just come up afterwards. I have no secrets. You can look through all this. And here's an outline of chapter 3. Just help to sink in a little bit more. No one gave me instruction to make an outline. I just like to do it. Yes, I'm a little weird. But you probably figured that out. But then after I did step 3, Margaret gave me instructions let me just check the time, I'm trying to stay on track. To make a list of everybody. She gave me this notebook, she bought it, she happened to buy it in my favorite color. She got it at John Watt and Cape Cod. I made a list of everybody I was mad at, and institutions and principals, myself, my husband, my daughter, my son, my mother, my father, my cousins, my sister, just all these people. And there were a lot of people turning the pages. Kate Middleton, The Ditches of York. So great. To 317 people, something like that. 350, a lot of dupes in there too. I had to make a list of those. I did that, and I was to pray on my knees before I did it. Now, my sponsor was kind of old school. Margaret, did steps with Laurel, and Laurel was the first woman to ever do steps this way. So it was kind of strict. I was to work for 4 to 6 hours a week. I needed to tell her my schedule, what days and times I would be planning to do this, text her when I started and texted her when I finished. And I don't know how that sits with you, but it was something I needed because I've just been diagnosed a couple of years ago with ADHD. And I would have procrastinated doing this until the night before I was going to meet with her, and then I would have written all night, and it wouldn't have been as good. So I'm glad that she did that. I really needed that structure. And so I used to get up early, I used to get up at 5 and write from 5:30 to 6:30 because my kids were little at the time. It was the only time I could count on, like nobody was going to barge in on me and interrupt me. Then I was to make a list of every resentment I had against those people. So, for example, my daughter screams and yells, is messy, socially awkward. I had to write, like the right-hand side of the page, where you write the name of the person, the resentment, and then the effects. Some of you have done this and some of you haven't, so I'm just showing you in case you haven't. And then the effects, and I was given a list of effects. I had to write them, I had to look them up. But pride, personal relationships, self-esteem, security, fear, sex relations and ambition, something like that. I didn't like those. They didn't really mean much to me, so I thought I would make up my own list. It did not go over well. I was redirected back to the list. This is the list, you're using the list. So for months and months, I got up early and wrote this my business school that I went to. It's here. My name, my friend, all these resentments. And then after I got through all those, and I filled up this whole notebook. It's a 5-subject notebook, and plus I had some more in my other notebook. But I know other people have longer notebook, more notebooks, longer numbers of resentments, but this is what I had. And I wanted to do it really thoroughly, and so I trusted and relied on God to give me all of these. And then I was given the instructions for what we call the turnarounds. And that's when, for each of those resentments, I was to do the right-hand side of the page. Where was I selfish? Where was I self-seeking? Where was I dishonest? Where was I afraid? And I found it really confusing. It was very difficult to understand, for example, where I was selfish. Like, for example, this one, this woman I knew, I was in a store, she told me to come to her to give her my phone number. I was offended, I thought she should come to me. Nothing too petty, nothing too petty. And I wrote for selfish, I don't want to be ordered around by her. So that's my selfish. I don't know, like when I wrote these, that these were very good. But I did my best. Self-seeking, what did I do to try to get what I wanted? I griped about it to other people, so I gossiped. Dishonesty, I told myself she should come to me, but she was at the register checking out. I was so caught up in my own selfishness and fear of her disrespecting me that I couldn't see the truth in front of me, which was that she was in the middle of a transaction. Of course I should go over to her. But my fear was so strong, I couldn't see the truth. Fear of other people's opinions, fear of not being respected. So I wrote like 1,000 of these. There's so many of these. There's just, like I said, over 300 people, for each one, multiple of these. And I think sometimes it can seem scary to do this because that paragraph on page 64, I think it is, it's so pejorative where it says, hang on a second. No, it's not 64. It's 67. Putting out of our minds the wrongs others have done resolutely for our own mistakes. Situation had not been entirely our fault. Where were we to blame? We saw our faults. We admitted our wrongs. It just sounds so mean, because I already thought I was this horrible, shameful person. But that wasn't what it was like writing. What it was like writing was like, oh my gosh, like I could feel started to have a spiritual experience with my higher power. And I started to feel like the love of my higher power showing me that, wow, like you were really afraid in those situations. And I started to learn that actually, I wasn't this bad, shameful person. I was a very fearful person. And I had had a lot of adverse childhood experiences. I had been traumatized. I was adopted, so even just being adopted, even as a baby, is a trauma. So of course I was fearful. It didn't mean I was bad. And so there was this process of healing that took place from writing this and seeing in great detail in every one of those situations how, no, you weren't a bad person. You were afraid and you were traumatized. And I love you and I want to help you heal. And so reading all this in step 5 to my sponsor, because this is all stuff I had talked about in therapy. But the problem is, first of all, we didn't invite God into therapy. And second of all, I had to look in a lot of detail every one of these granular little situations because I didn't know what I didn't know. I couldn't see that she was at the register. She wasn't trying to disrespect me. So I was misperceiving things. And I needed God to show me where and how I was perceiving things incorrectly. And the dishonesty is very hard to see on my own. I need my higher power to show it to me, and I need to work with other alcoholics to see it. The other parts of step 4 are writing down our fears. It talks about driven by 100 forms of fear. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. I have my list of fears. I had to write on the right-hand side of the page my fears. I had, how many did I have? So many, 125, something like that. Oh no, more than that. Okay, 227. Fear of crying. Still have that. Fear of losing my teeth. And then I know some people use a really long format for their fear turnaround, but on the Cape we didn't do that. So I had to write a turnaround that was quite simple. I trusted and relied on myself to remove my fear of getting sick. I should trust and rely on God to remove my fear of getting sick. Simple. What's the point of doing, and I wrote this, I remember sitting in the hospital, my mother was dying, I was sitting there next to our bed, writing out my fears. But it was when I wrote this, I got a little glimpse of, oh, what if I didn't have the fear of getting sick? It was just the first glimpse into a world where I'm not afraid of getting sick. So I wrote those out, and then I had to do my sex conduct part. That sounds scary. It's not. All it is I made a list of everybody that I dated, had sexual relationships with, or flirtations, and I asked for help with crushes. And I had a list of 39 people. It was all guys. And then for each one of those, I needed to write down where was I selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate, whom had I hurt. So this guy, selfish, I wanted to feel closeness, love, and excitement. Dishonesty was purely a relationship of convenience. I didn't really care about him. Inconvenience, I gave him hickeys. His mother did not like that. Who did I hurt? His mother, neighbors. Did I arouse jealousy? I flirted with his friend. What should I have done instead? Not snuck around, not given him hickeys, broken up with him if I wasn't interested in him. I shouldn't have drank alcohol with him. This was the person I first drank alcohol with. And what I should have done was ask my higher power for guidance. And writing out the sex conduct stuff, I looked at it and I could see that every single relationship, we have to ask ourselves the question at the end for each of these, was it selfish? Every single relationship, flirtation, crush, selfish. What could I get from these guys? You know, like rides to the airport, like just literally anything. Instead of thinking of them as human beings, not as like a cardboard two-dimensional cutout. You know, these are human beings. They had moms that loved them, didn't want them to have hickeys on their necks, right? I wanted validation and approval. I wanted to feel safe. I wanted to feel beautiful, respected, and cherished. I wanted to feel connection. So you just wanted all these things. I was using these poor people for this. I don't do that now. Thank you, God. And I read all this to Margaret. My sponsor was out of the Cape, and I was up here mostly. She used to drive, and we didn't rent them. Sometimes sponsees are afraid about reading things to their sponsor. They're afraid they're going to feel ashamed of things they did, and and I would say my experience was, it was more the opposite. It was just like taking away shame. Because I hadn't had any like big thing, like I hadn't killed anyone or like I hadn't told anybody, you know, I hadn't done anything like that. It was like these, you know, being jealous of Kate Middleton. You know, it was like stupid, petty stuff. I was like embarrassed to admit that. And I had to tell that stuff to Margaret, you know, and she would just be very kind and reassuring and maybe share a time when she had been jealous of somebody, you know. She would help me to feel like part of the human race and that other people have these. I didn't know that other people had these experiences because I was too ashamed to talk about it. And God was there with us. And so it was all received in this beautiful healing way. And then the things that had happened to me, like I mentioned, like my boyfriend assaulting me, you know, being able to tell somebody that and have her in the presence of God show me love and care and compassion was very healing. I wouldn't want to miss out on that. Like if you have the opportunity for that, I promise you won't regret it because it just healed all these years of shame and self-hatred and self-loathing, and it doesn't need to be that way. So I finished step 5, January 2nd, 2018. So I would say my whole process of doing 4, 5, 6, and 7, something like that, maybe took, I don't know, maybe 14 months, something like that. And that was writing 4 to 6 hours a day, and that was meeting with Margaret, you know, like every week and a half. So it does take a while, it's worth it though. I went to Corporation Beach in Dennis and sat there in the car. It was cold, and I'm looking for my notes. I asked God to show me the key takeaways from my writing. I reviewed everything, like it says in the book. I reviewed everything to see if I had missed anything important, and it didn't seem like I had. So I wrote down what I heard from God. God said I had been expecting other people to take care of me and getting pissed off when they did not. I was using other people to assuage my fears. I was hating myself for having fears. I was expecting perfection from myself and others. I was putting other people's wants ahead of my needs and putting my wants ahead of other people's needs. This all came from God. I could never come up with this on my own. I'm a precious child of God. God made me the way I am. I will accept that. I will accept that God made others. God decides. I accept and trust, knowing that I'm loved. So all these are really beautiful messages God gave me in that hour, sitting at Corporation Beach. How lucky am I to get that? I read the paragraphs, I don't know what page it's on, 6 and 7, and read the 7-step prayer. And that's it, I was done with step 6 and 7. There was no drop the rocking or anything like that in the way I did it. I'm not against that, I just didn't do it. I sort of look now at step 6 and 7 as being like dispositional steps, like I'm disposing myself now to allow God to remove my defects of character through the rest of the steps. So it doesn't say anywhere in the book, and it doesn't say anywhere, no one said to me, like, as soon as you finish step 6 and 7, you will have no more character defects. But like somehow I kind of thought that might be true. I don't know where I got that idea. I was like a little bit confused by that. It's some like magic wand. Like, what is happening? And sometimes like I or others might get frustrated when something quote unquote comes back, like that we thought had been removed, you know. And I don't think it's that way. Like I've come to understand that it's a slow, gradual process of chipping away. Like these are really deep-rooted, like maybe neural traces in our brain, like, you know, in our body even, like the body keeps the score, you know. So it takes a long time, it has taken a long time for me rather, to like slowly, through the rest of the steps, begin to let go of those character defects. So then I was invited to make a list for my 8th step. Of people I'd harmed. I found step 8 very difficult because I was confused about what was my responsibility and what wasn't. I was just very codependent and enmeshed. And so I thought if somebody didn't like me, that I was to blame for that. That it was my job to at all times ensure all people everywhere are happy with me. That's actually not that easy to do. Surprisingly, right? So I made a list of people I had harmed on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side, I made notes about what I had done. And there were quite a few people. And this format confused me. So what I ended up doing was making a spreadsheet, because that makes me happy. And probably wouldn't make anyone else in this room happy, but it made me happy. I made a spreadsheet, and I sorted them by priority, status, of my next steps, reasons I didn't make amends to them. I know, I was too confused with them all just written down in here. I couldn't get out of my own way. And I slowly went through them. And I'll tell you about my dad. So my dad just passed away 6 weeks ago. He was living at St. Francis up the street. He was 95. When I was a child, he was very angry and violent. He wasn't an alcoholic, but he would have been if he could have been. He would throw up after he had a couple of beers. And he had brothers that died at a young age of alcoholism. So he had PTSD from the Korean War. He was in an anti-artillery battalion. He was abused as a child. He had no conditions to heal from any of that. And so, unfortunately, to his great sorrow and ours, he would take it out on me and my mom. I made amends to him for my part in things. And he made amends back to me. He felt bad about the things he had done. It was very healing to hear that from my father. And I took care of him for 9 years after my mother did die finally in the middle of my 4th step. So I took care of my dad the last 9 years. He's had a lot of health problems. And over the past, I did many 10 steps. So even after he made amends to me, the things will come up again. in response to events that took place. And I would write the 10 steps, and God would heal me a little more. So by the time this year rolled around, we just had this like really loving, caring relationship with no trace of resentment at all. And it had not been good when I was a child. I mean, like, he had choked me up against a wall at one point. Like, it was not good. And then we ended up just like, I love you, hug each other, we did things together all the time. That's what's possible with this work. You know, it's just amazing. The last amends I did was to the city of Boston. I had stolen parking when I was in college. I drove to BU, and I used to break the parking meters and park for free. Yeah. And a woman in Big Book Subset pointed out to me, I thought that was funny, like I didn't have any concept that I was stealing from the city. And she said, well, you need to make amends for that. I was like, wow, really? So I had it on there, and people said, you're crazy, like, people steal way more from the city. You don't need to do that. And I said, but I felt that I did. I felt that I was hearing from God that I did. And I made a spreadsheet to try to estimate how much I owed them. I had assumptions, and I, tried to figure out how much I owed the city. And I finally called the parking office, and I said, listen, I owe the city money. I used to, I'm an AA. I used to steal parking, part of my amends. And the lady didn't laugh at me. She was really nice. She said, well, let me look you up on the computer. I wasn't in the computer because it was so long ago. So I'm sorry, I can't take your money unless it's in the computer. So I hung up. This is great. So I called my sponsor, and she's like, yeah, no, that's not going to cut it, So I contacted the mayor's office. Wait, she's like, this is what you have to do. And I contacted the mayor's office, and they're like, well, we can't take your money either. And they said, but we can connect you with the transportation department, and maybe you can volunteer there. So I'm like, oh my God, now I'm like back in the subway with the rats, like I was. I didn't sign up for this. But are we willing to go to any lengths, or are we not? And I was. So it took me so long to finally contact the head of transportation, and I was going to tell him how much I thought I owed, and then I just decided I was going to leave it all in God's hands. And I wrote him an email, I explained what I was doing, and I emailed him. And would you believe he let me off the hook? Now this whole process that I just described to you took me about a year to do this. And it kept getting worse because I was talking to people about it, and they're pointing things out to me, like, well, if you broke the meter on Monday and they didn't fix it till next Monday, the city didn't get any of that revenue, and that's your fault. So you actually owe way more than you think. And somebody else pointed out, well, you probably ended up breaking some meters, or they had to send a crew out, and it cost $50 an hour to pay those guys, and maybe they had to replace some of the meters. But now we're talking thousands of dollars. So I was really nervous, so it took me a long time. But what happened, I feel like my higher power knew what they were doing, because it took so long that I had to really reflect on my behavior behind the wheel. And the way I drove growing up in Boston and the way I parked growing up in Boston were not in accordance with the principles we practice in this program. And I wouldn't, if I had just written a check to some charity or whatever, I wouldn't have had that reflection. So that's why I feel it's really important to listen to my higher power when I'm doing this, and listen to their guidance tell me to do this. So I think maybe almost out of time, but let me just finish by saying steps 10, 11, and 12, I do practice them all the time. I brought with me, so step 10, I do always look for where I'm selfish, dishonest, fearful, resentful. Resentful is the easiest thing to do, to look for, because because you're mad. Call someone immediately, write it out like the fourth step, so forth. Fear, there's other good journaling prompts for that. I highly recommend those. But praying and talking to other people, dishonesty and selfishness are harder to find. But I brought with me to show you, this is a book you can get on Amazon. If you have trouble writing out your 11th step at night because it's so long and tedious, this is great because it has already the questions written in it that we're supposed to, in case you didn't know, we're supposed to be writing these out every night. A sponsor gave me the instructions to do this. I didn't want to do it. Having an accountability buddy, my cousin, we take pictures and send it to each other to help us stay accountable. I would say from doing steps 10 and 11, I've been able to receive as much spiritual progress as my original 4th step, if not more. Try to carry the message, sponsor other women. It's like the best thing in the world to do. It's like unbelievable to witness other people's transformation and healing. And then as you try to carry the message as much as I can, I try to practice the principles, especially at home. That's the hardest place to do so. And if you ask my husband and kids if I practice the principles at home, I don't know what they'd say, because I don't feel like I do a great job of it all the time. But, you know, what my higher power has said to me on many occasions is, I'm enough for God. Like, I don't think I've done a good enough job, but I'm enough for God. God's okay with it. So I feel like as long as we just don't give up and we keep making spiritual progress, not perfection, that we can stay